Welcome to the Economy Magazine. I'm Benjamin Chong Alfares with the news from the global economy. On today's show, Uruguay upgrades using smart, sustainable farming methods. And the new Exodus blockbuster gets banned in the Middle East. First, the headlines. Oil prices hit fresh 5-year lows on Monday as a sharp rise in U.S. production leaves the global market oversupplied. Both the U.S. and global benchmarks lost more than 2% after figures from energy data service Genscape showed further growth in U.S. oil supplies. Light sweet crude for February delivery ended down 2.1% at $53.61 a barrel, while Brent crude sank 2.6% to $57.88 a barrel. The petroleum sector is the worst performer among commodities this year. Asian stocks were mostly lower on Tuesday as apprehension over Greek politics and the rickety Russian ruble dented confidence in the global economy. Tokyo's Nikkei 225 fell 1.57%, while South Korea's Kospi fell 0.64%, down 4.8% for the year. Hong Kong's Hang Seng shed 1.14%, and Australia's ASX 200 fell 1.04%. Investors worry upcoming Greek elections might be won by the left-wing opposition Syriza party, which rejects Greece's bailout deal. Russian monetary officials have made stabilizing the ruble a priority amid slumping oil revenues. But on Tuesday, the currency fell further, losing 0.5% against the US dollar. Iraq's finance minister said the 2015 budget will meet Iraq's basic needs and the government will impose taxes for the first time on public services. The minister said Iraq was not at risk of bankruptcy despite the war against the Islamic State, the loss of agriculture, and the drop in oil prices. Iraq's cabinet drafted the budget worth $103 billion last week and sent it to Parliament for approval. The minister acknowledged that there had been criticism of the budget, but said he was confident that the country would be able to cover its expenses.
There is no minister, no official, and not even a party who is satisfied with this budget, because actually, we have dealt with everyone in accordance with reality and available revenues. Therefore, we have pressured everyone to make them respond positively to the country's basic needs in order to work out a practical and actual budget.
Russia's economy contracted for the first time in more than 5 years in November, in the latest sign that the economy is heading toward recession next year. Russia's gross domestic product shrank 0.5% on the year in November, the economy's first contraction over a 12-month period since late 2009. The HSBC Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index fell to 48.9 in December, below the 50-point mark that separates contraction from growth. And as Western sanctions, massive capital outflows, and low oil prices continue to weigh on the Russian economy, some predict Russia's economic demise in 2015.
We see Russia with sadness, with tears, because we see that its economy will decline. The current President Putin is going to despair. They are not well favored.
Using smart, sustainable farming methods such as GM crops, genetically chosen cows, satellites, and drones, Uruguay, with a population of just 3 million people, aims to produce enough food to feed 50 million. Here are the details.
It's a tiny South American country with less than 3 million inhabitants. But Uruguay has set itself a 10-year goal of being able to produce enough food to feed 50 million. The plan is to use smart or sustainable agriculture while preserving the country's fertile soils and diverse natural resources.
Intensificación sostenible para producir cada vez más, como dice.
Sustainable intensification of production while protecting our natural resources, with the strategy of adapting to climate change, having rural development in mind, without forgetting about the existing differences among producers, and being smart while using the institutional capabilities of both private and public sectors in an articulate way.
Uruguay exports 78% of what it produces, mostly meat, soy, rice, wheat, wood, and wool. And with almost 1 in 5 working people living off the agricultural sector, the government is trying to push up production to boost the economy. One way the government has helped the private sector is by increasing internet coverage. Gabriel Carbalal says this lets him use satellite information to detect soil fertility.
De repente, dentro de un mismo lote, que a los efectos anteriores, a los efectos.
Before, with traditional agriculture, we could only farm one field, whereas now we can divide it into 3 or 4 units, which means we can save fertilizer. Or if we use the same amount of fertilizer, we use it more efficiently according to the fertility of each area.
Echando el mismo fertilizante, aplicarlo más eficientemente según las necesidades de cada punto.
Some farms are taking things a step further. This is one of the few in the world where experts are genetically selecting bulls to produce more meat. They're also tested for methane output to try to reduce the impact on climate change. High-tech developments also include the use of drones to see which areas need watering and which areas don't.
O el desafío es encontrar el equilibrio donde logramos
The key is to reach a win-win situation. We produce more, but generate fewer emissions by production unit. At the same time, we produce more, being more competitive. We are reliable food producers, and this generates new job opportunities in our society.
Much of Uruguay's success is down to the widespread use of genetically modified crops, which critics say could damage ecosystems. But the country has already gone from producing enough to feed 9 million people in 2005 to 28 million people today. It's now hoping smart agriculture will add up to almost double that production in a decade's time.
Unfortunately, we don't all have the gift of clairvoyance to predict what will be with the economy in 2015. With us in the studio to get some more clarity on where the markets might be headed is Jeroen Golger, co-founder and CEO at I Know First Market Forecasting Technologies. Mr. Golger, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So what does I Know First base its predictions on?
In order to generate prediction for 2015, we are using self-learning algorithm that generate daily prediction for 2000 markets based on artificial intelligence, machine learning, and genetic algorithms.
Okay, and what is the forecast for 2015 for the markets, the global markets?
Well, 2015 is going to be an interesting year. During the last years, the US equity market rose by 63%. And during 2014, this year, the US market rose by 14%. Right now, the algorithm predicts that the US equity market will stay stable on the current level of 2,100.
Okay.
The volatility is going to get down a little bit. And the leading sector is going to be the technology sector, for the short term at least.
Okay, very interesting. And what about oil? I mean, oil has been a very, very big part of the economic story globally this past year. Where do you see oil going in 2015?
Right. Perhaps the most significant event in the market this year was the crash in the oil prices. Crude oil dropped almost 50%.
Yeah.
And the price today is around $53 a barrel.
Right.
However, the algorithm predicts that this trend is going to turn during the next year, during 2015.
Right.
In the short term, we're going to have some volatility. However, for the long term, the crude oil might be an interesting investment opportunity.
Okay. Well, Jeroen Golger, I Know First CEO and founder, thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Once again, Hollywood has released a film depicting a biblical story, but as the movie departs from the biblical account of the Jewish exodus from Egypt and takes a particularly a-religious approach, it has been banned in parts of the Middle East. Here's the story.
The $140 million biblical epic Exodus Gods and Kings has been banned in both Morocco and Egypt. Egypt's ban is focused on what they call historical inaccuracies in the tale, while Morocco's move is centered on the Ridley Scott-directed film's depiction of God, which is forbidden in Islam. This isn't the first time this year that this has happened. Darren Aronofsky's Noah was banned in a number of Islamic countries for depicting the titular prophet. Some say this makes sense from a cultural perspective.
Well, like, religion and culture is like a really sensitive topic for some people, so I can see why they would get like offended.
Half of my is actually from that part of the one I can understand. Culturally, I can understand why would people, usually they're conservative and I mean, I think I can understand that.
And while it is a relatively small market, censorship can cost. According to one distributor, the film could have grossed $500,000 in Morocco. Despite this, the business side is clear and has worked as the film took in nearly $25 million in its opening weekend.
You know what it does? It's Hollywood. Hollywood is Hollywood, and they're going to do what does, people appeal on the screen, that's it.
Indeed, the film has grossed more than $100 million in its first 2 weeks, despite calls to boycott the film for what protesters say are racist casting choices.
And we're joined now by I-24 News reporter Ayman Siksak for a discussion of movies in the Middle East. Ayman, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So what's the story with movies in the Middle East?
Well, it's really crazy, especially when you look at Egypt specifically. And Exodus is not the first film to be banned only in Egypt. Egypt has done this before with really high-grossing, very popular movies. The Matrix was banned in Egypt.
Really?
Yes, because its philosophical turn kind of made people feel like this was a religious undermining of religion and religious values.
It's interesting because in Israel, there were actually religious people who saw it as an addition, so to speak, a way of interpreting religion.
Absolutely.
Curious.
Which really just goes to show you how it's all a cultural concept of how we view these movies. Another really successful movie, The Da Vinci Code, was banned in Egypt, this time from the Catholic community who felt like this was degrading to the religion. But I think what we're really seeing here with these bans is, even though these movies are really successful abroad, all over the world, they grossed a lot of money, what's happening really is that when these movies are banned in Egypt, people are more inclined to download them, find some other way to... Exactly, it's more exciting. We're seeing this with The Interview now all over the world.
Yeah,
and
except for the downloading, of course, does not do much for their pockets when, it comes down to the money.
That is true, but people are downloading so many music and movies anyway, even if they're not banned. So economically, it's not going to affect the movie industry too much, even though American movies are extremely popular in the Arab world. Transformers and X-Men this year made over $20 million in the Arab world, in the UAE and Lebanon specifically, also Egypt, which really just goes to show you that the ban is mostly cultural. It's not really an economic hindrance. But I think the only way to look at this in a really, really serious fashion economically is, are we seeing here the beginning of a trend? It's hard to say whether this is the way we're going or not, but maybe Egypt is starting now to just ban Western products.
What about the dictator?
Well, The Dictator had another interesting story a year ago. When The Dictator was released, moviegoers actually banned it. They didn't like the racial stereotyping by Sacha Baron Cohen. So it's really, what we can deduce from this is there's no need for a ban. When people don't want to see a movie, they just don't buy the tickets.
Now, I wonder if there's been any difference, talking about dictators, since the onset of the Arab Spring, if there has been a difference in terms of how these movies are received.
Well, you see, that's what Sacha Baron Cohen thought initially, that this movie would be hugely successful in the Arab world because it kind of preempted the Arab Spring. Arab dictators were ridiculed for a long, long time. But moviegoers just didn't like it. They didn't go. They didn't buy the tickets. The movie still succeeded, though, which goes to show us that when it comes to making money, he who laughs last laughs the longest, after all.
Right, right. I guess it's ultimately really a cultural experience overall as well. I mean, essentially, I mean, people basically, what they see on the screen, if it doesn't, it doesn't appeal to them, if they feel that they're being ridiculed, which, Sacha Baron Cohen certainly is known for doing,
absolutely,
it doesn't really help their case much.
Absolutely. And, the issue of how Arabs are represented in cinema, specifically Western cinema, is extremely touchy.
Right.
And we see this as being controversial in Exodus and also in The Dictator, both of which created huge controversy in the Arab world. But it's interesting that only Egypt is being the pioneer of banning Western movies. Mm-hmm. It will be interesting to see what other economic steps Egypt will take, symbolically or otherwise, against Western entertainment industry.
Now, a curious side topic to this, of course, is that Egypt is the movie, the Hollywood, if you want, of the Middle East. I mean, do they perceive maybe competition from these Western movies coming in?
Well, I think the main thing for Egypt is that over these past 4 years since the Arab Spring, which you've mentioned, is that there's been so much change that now really the whole concept of how the West is perceived and accepted in Egypt has shifted radically.
Okay, well, Ayman Siksak, thank you very much for joining us on the magazine.
Thank you, Binyamin.
Well, that's the end of our economy magazine, your daily source for economic and financial report. I'm Binyamin Faris. Join us again tomorrow for more on the economy.